Hello and welcome everyone. This is going to be my first podcast. Today is 15th August. So we have been discussing internally a lot of things. घर पे हम लोग बहुत सारी बातें AI के बारे में करते रहते हैं और फिर सोचा कि एक पॉडकास्ट कर लेते हैं, एक डिस्कशन कर लेते हैं, एक फॉर्मल कर लेते हैं चीज़ों को, क्योंकि सेम क्वेश्चन जो हम लोग डिस्कस करते हैं आपस में सिमिलर मैं फ्रेंड्स के साथ भी डिस्कस कर रहा हूँ बहुत सारी चीज़ें. सो एवरीबडी इज काइंड ऑफ इंटरेस्टेड इन AI. आई हैव बीन डूइंग अ लॉट ऑफ वीडियोज ऑन AI एज वेल. आई हैव बीन डूइंग a lot of stuff on AI. Not that I'm an expert there. I'm still learning myself as well. But so that's where we thought probably common questions जो हैं उसके बारे में डिस्कशन कर लेंगे. And maybe Akshun is also doing a lot of stuff, not essentially programmatically, but a lot of stuff on AI with lots of tools and stuff. So he'll talk from his perspective. He'll probably ask questions and we'll discuss those things. So this is going to be absolutely informal. This is going to be more like a discussion. Let's see where it goes. So so this is Akshan. He's my son. Let's see what we talk about. We'll figure out whether we publish it or not. But okay.
So thank you for the introduction. I'll jump right in and just ask, what's artificial intelligence? What is it? What does the word mean?
Artificial intelligence, basically two words, artificial and intelligence, right? So इसके पहले कि हम artificial intelligence को define करें, हमें पता होना चाहिए intelligence क्या है, right? तो according to you, what exactly is intelligence? What do you think intelligence is?
Intelligence is the ability to solve a problem. In one line, I would say the easiest way to explain intelligence would be to solve any problem.
Okay, so basically you're saying primarily analytical skills, problem solving skills is intelligence. हाँ, शायद वैसा ही है, बट मेरे हिसाब से उसके अलावा भी नॉर्मल डे टू डे लाइफ में वी डू अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स वेयर maybe we are not solving problems exactly, but street smartness, you basically do जिस चीज़ पे भी आप बहुत ज़्यादा फोकस करते हो, बहुत ज़्यादा काम कर रहे हो, तो उसके अराउंड आपकी थोड़ी इंटेलिजेंस डेवलप हो जाती है, थोड़ी स्मार्टनेस डेवलप हो जाती है. दैट ऑल्सो आई वुड काउंट एज इंटेलिजेंस. सो प्राइमरली मेरे हिसाब से एक गोल अगर आपने डिसाइड कर लिया, वो गोल कुड बी पजल सॉल्विंग, वो गोल कुड बी एनी रियल लाइफ गोल, अ नॉवल सिचुएशन, जिसके अराउंड अगर आप स्टेप्स डिफाइन कर पाते हो और आप वो प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करते हुए वो गोल अचीव कर पाते हो, देन यू आर इंटेलिजेंट इनफ. सो दैट्स व्हाट इंटेलिजेंस इज, एबिलिटी टू सॉल्व प्रॉब्लम्स, एबिलिटी टू अचीव अ गोल, राइट? तो इफ वी थिंक कि हमने इंटेलिजेंस को डिफाइन कर दिया है, नाउ सेम थिंग इफ इट कैन बी अचीव्ड बाय अ कंप्यूटर और अ आर्टिफिशियल डिवाइस, देन इट इज आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, राइट? तो बेसिकली सेम चीज़ आज की डेट में अगर हम बात कर रहे हैं तो LLMs, कुछ दिन पहले बात कर रहे थे तो डीप न्यूरल नेटवर्क्स, उसके पहले हम बात कर रहे थे तो कंप्यूटर प्रोग्राम्स को भी बोला हमने एक समय पे आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस का पार्ट है. तो एक समय पंच कार्ड्स होते थे, देवर ऑल्सो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस. तो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस इज़ अ ह्यूज थिंग. उसके बहुत सारे, अगर हम वेन डायग्राम की टर्म्स में बात करें तो उसके अंदर बहुत सारे पीसेज हैं, और उसमें एक बहुत अंदर का सर्कल है LLMs, जिसको आज की डेट में हम आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस के फॉर्म में देख रहे हैं.
ओके, सो बेसिकली कैलकुलेटर है मेरे कंप्यूटर पे, वो एक प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करता है जो मैं उससे देता हूँ. क्या मैं कह सकता हूँ वो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस?
हाँ, मतलब एक जो हम ब्रॉड डेफिनेशन की बात कर रहे हैं उसमें हम कैलकुलेटर को भी आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस में इंक्लूड कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि अल्टीमेटली इट्स सॉल्विंग सम प्रॉब्लम फॉर यू, राइट? बट इट्स अ वेरी स्पेसिफिक, वेरी नीश प्रॉब्लम विच इज़ ओके. तो एक ब्रॉड डेफिनेशन में दैट कैन बी टर्म्ड एज आर्टिफिशियली इंटेलिजेंट.
सो 2025 में जो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस की बात हम कर रहे हैं, वी नो व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ इंटेलिजेंस वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट, LLMs, वो कहाँ से आया एकदम से?
तो एकदम से नहीं हुआ. बेसिकली आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस तो 1950s 40s 50s में एलन ट्यूरिंग वाज देयर हु टॉक्ड अबाउट थिंकिंग मशीन्स. ठीक है, थिंकिंग मशीन बेसिकली उस समय वो सोच पा रहा था कि भाई मशीन्स ऐसी होंगी जो सोच पाएंगे, जो प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करेंगी. सो उस समय के आसपास, मुझे डेट एग्जैक्टली बहुत याद नहीं रहती, हिस्ट्री में बहुत वीक था, तो उस समय के आसपास शायद ये टर्म कॉइन हुआ होगा, राइट? बट उसके बाद से बहुत सारी चीज़ें करते प्रोग्रामिंग करते हुए फिर हम लोग ने बहुत सारे प्रोग्राम्स लेके हमने सॉफ्टवेयर डेवलप कर लिया, राइट? फिर उसके बीच में मुझे लगता है 80s के आसपास कभी न्यूरल नेटवर्क की बात शुरू हुई थी, या 70s में शुरू हो गई होगी, लाइक ऐसे डेट्स बहुत वीक एरिया मेरा. तो न्यूरल नेटवर्क्स की बात हुई, उस समय लोगों को ऐसा लगा कि न्यूरल नेटवर्क्स कुड बी पावरफुल थिंग, बट दे डिडंट हैव रिसोर्सेज, दे डिडंट हैव डेटा, दे डिडंट हैव कंप्यूट पावर, सो दे कुड नॉट डू अ लॉट ऑफ एक्सपेरिमेंट्स देयर. फिर वो करते करते बेसिकली 1980s 90 में कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट हुए. फिर 2010 के आसपास पीपल स्टार्टेड काइंड ऑफ इन्वेस्टिगेटिंग दैट अगेन, बिकॉज उस समय तक काफ़ी सारा डेटा इंटरनेट की वजह से आ चुका था और कंप्यूट भी साइजेबल होना शुरू हो गया था, राइट. तो उस समय लोगों ने एक्सपेरिमेंट करना शुरू कर दिया. और जैसा कि शायद मोस्ट लाइकली 2016 के आसपास ओपन एआई फॉर्म हो गई, तो ये जो लियासट स्कीवर वगैरह है, राइट, दे वर एक्सपेरिमेंटिंग एट गूगल्स लैब इन 2010 11 12 इन स्टफ, राइट. तो इन ये लोग तो बेसिकली दे वर वर्किंग ऑन ए आई, लाइक दिस काइंड ऑफ ए आई, न्यूरल नेटवर्क रिलेटेड ए आई फ्रॉम 2000 इटसेल्फ, है ना. बट जनरल पब्लिक के पास आते आते लोगों के लिए यूजबल होते होते इट बिकेम 2020 एंड 22 में आई थिंक, या 22 के बिगनिंग में जब ओपन एआई ने लॉन्च किया 3.5, दैट्स वेयर इट स्टार्टेड एज ए एक्सप्लोजन फॉर अस, बट दिस वाज हैपनिंग फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम. तो मैंने भी जब 2018 17 18 19 में बेसिकली a lot of machine learning was happening, a lot of deep learning was happening, right. तो machine learning के time पे I was also very interested in AI. We were doing a lot of things at Codefire at that point of time as well. I kind of published a lot of blogs as well. But the moment it went into deep learning, then again it was GPUs किसके पास ज़्यादा है, कौन कर सकता है. तो then we gave up because we were not computationally, we didn't want to invest that much there. तो मशीन लर्निंग पे हमने कुछ काम किया, फिर हमने डीप लर्निंग के समय छोड़ दिया. नाउ ऑल ऑफ अ सडन LLMs are accessible for everybody. Everybody is able to kind of use APIs, so we are back into this. So हाँ, तो huge explosion happened around the moment OpenAI launched it. But टेक्निकली जो लोग इन्वॉल्व थे उनको 2010 से होता हुआ दिख रहा था, धीरे धीरे प्रोग्रेस हो रही थी. तो इट्स लाइक अ एक्सपोनेंशियल कर्व. इट वाज नॉट अवेलेबल टू एवरीबडी, बट इट वाज हैपनिंग इन द बैकग्राउंड.
Okay. I mean, OpenAI was founded around 2016, 2017, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these newer companies, Grok was founded like a year or two ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Perplexity was founded 3-4 years ago. Ultimately, सबके LLMs, सबकी जो मेन मार्केटेबल प्रोडक्ट है वो अब 24 के आसपास 25 में पीक पे है अपने. वो चीज़ मैं जानना चाहता कि ये कैसे हुआ, जब इवन दो कुछ कंपनीज ऑलमोस्ट डेकेड पहले शुरू हुई, कुछ अभी शुरू हुई 1-2 साल पहले.
देखो परप्लेक्सिटी मुझे लगता है कि सो वन थिंग इज एआई रिसर्च, कि रिसर्चर्स क्या कर रहे हैं और क्या नया लेकर के आ रहे हैं. सेकेंड थिंग इज application side of that research, right? People are using it to make it usable for consumers like us, right? तो हमारी डोमेन में हमें एज अ यूजर तो AI तभी दिखेगा जब हमारे लेट्स से एलेक्सा में या सीरी में या हमारे किसी आसपास किसी डिवाइस में आएगा, राइट? तो रिसर्चर्स हो सकता है कि अभी आगे और बहुत सारा काम कर रहे हो जो कि विजिबल नहीं है, बट एक वेव तभी शुरू होती है व्हेन इट्स पब्लिकली अवेलेबल. तो जब ChatGPT 3.5 आ गया तो लोगों को लगा अच्छा, अब तो एक कंपटीशन होता था 2015-16 में कि बेसिकली एलन ट्यूरिंग ने जो डिफाइन किया था ना, उसका टेस्ट ये था ASI का, ASI नहीं, AGI का, आर्टिफिशियल जनरल इंटेलिजेंस का, कि भाई अगर मैं किसी चैटबॉट से बात करूं और मैं बता नहीं पाऊं कि उस साइड पे मशीन है या ह्यूमन है, then I'll assume it's a artificial general intelligence. That was his definition as much as I remember. Facts मेरे बहुत weak है, ठीक है. तो ये चीज़, और 2015, 16, 17 में एक कंपटीशन होता था. एवरीबडी यूज्ड टू पुश डेवलप, बिग कंपनीज अपने चैटबॉट्स बनाती थी और फिर एक कंपटीशन होता था जहाँ पे लोग चैटबॉट से इंटरेक्ट करते थे और देखते थे किसका चैटबॉट बेस्ट है, किसको कौन सा वाला ऐसा ह्यूमन लाइक रिस्पॉन्सेज दे रहा है ना. तो एक समय पे हम लोग भी कोशिश कर रहे थे कुछ बनाने के लिए, हम लोग ने भी उस समय चैटबॉट वगैरह बनाए थे, विच इज़ वेयर आई वाज वेरी इंटरेस्टेड इन दैट कॉम्पिटिशन. बट जब ChatGPT 3.5 टर्बो वगैरह आया, राइट, सो दैट वाज द मोमेंट कि भाई वो कॉम्पिटिशन तो खत्म हो गया. अब उससे बात करते हुए पता ही नहीं चलता आप इंसान से बात कर रहे हो या कंप्यूटर से बात कर रहे हो. तो एलन ट्यूरिंग के हिसाब से तो AGI आ चुका. अब वो डेफिनेशन चेंज होती रहेगी और चलता है. तो पॉइंट ये है कि एक्सप्लोजन तभी होता है for masses when it becomes applicable, when it's available to general जनता to use it. तो इसलिए हमें लगता है कि एक्सप्लोजन अभी हुआ, बट ये काफ़ी सही तरीके से 2014-15 में काफ़ी काम हो रहा था AI पे, मतलब AI एज एन ML and DL.
Right. So एक और इंटरेस्टिंग चीज, I wasn't there जब .com बबल शुरू हुआ था, but you were, right? एंड बहुत लोग अब कंपेयर कर रहे हैं कि सेम चीज अभी जैसे डॉट कॉम बबल था 25 साल पहले, सेम थिंग इज हैपनिंग राइट नाउ। उसके बाद जो था डॉट कॉम बबल बर्स्ट भी हुआ था, काफी प्रॉब्लम्स वगैरह भी आई थी। इसमें नियर फ्यूचर में उस तरीके की हमें कुछ प्रॉब्लम दिख रही है जैसे डॉट कॉम बबल जब बर्स्ट हुआ था।
मैं इंडस्ट्री में लीडिंग माइंड नहीं हूँ, आई एम ऑल्सो अ फॉलोअर, राइट। तो मुझे जितना दिख रहा है तो डॉट कॉम बबल वॉज, हाँ मेरे समय पे हुआ था, आई वॉज एट योर एज एट दैट पॉइंट टाइम, जस्ट इंजीनियरिंग कंप्लीट करी थी 1999 में। तो उस समय ऑब्वियसली द होल थिंग वॉज चेंजिंग एंड पीपल वर थिंकिंग कि यार सब कुछ चेंज हो जाएगा, इंटरनेट ऐसा हो जाएगा वैसा, मतलब बट वैसा कभी पहले हुआ नहीं था, तो किसी को पता नहीं था कि क्या होगा, बट एवरीबॉडी वाज थिंकिंग हाँ इंटरनेट सब जगह अवेलेबल हो जाएगा, इन्फॉर्मेशन अवेलेबल हो जाएगी और बहुत सारी नई चीज़ें होंगी, ऐसा हम लोग। और जिसके पास इंटरनेट, तो जब हम लोग की जॉब वॉब लगी उस समय इंटरनेट जब एक्सेसिबल हो जाता तो वी वर लाइक अरे यार ऑफिस में इंटरनेट मिल जाता है, फ्री का मिल जाता है, यू कैन डू वट एवर यू वांट। तो अल्टीमेटली आई मीन यू हैव टू कॉन्स्टेंट योरसेल्फ, यू हैव टू डू द राइट थिंग्स, बट इंटरनेट अवेलेबिलिटी इनिशियली वाज स्केयर्स एंड देन स्टार्टेड हैपनिंग, राइट। तो लाइक यू सेड टॉक्ड अबाउट बबल, तो बहुत सारी कंपनीज जिनकी केवल सिंपल एक वेबसाइट होती थी, उनको ही बहुत सारा वैल्यूएशन मिला और बहुत सारे पैसे मिले एंड दो थिंग्स वर हैपनिंग। द डिफरेंस दिस टाइम दैट आई सी इज, हमारी जनरेशन ने एक ऐसा प्रोग्रेस देख रखी है, देयर वॉज अ बबल विच बर्स्ट एंड देन कंपनीज हैड टू स्लॉग हार्डर। तो वो एक्सपीरियंस ऑलरेडी आ चुका है ह्यूमंस के पास। ह्यूमंस आर रियली गुड एट अपने पास से सीखने के लिए, दे आर आई थिंक एटलीस्ट इंडस्ट्री एक्सपर्ट्स आर गुड एट दैट, दे जज थिंग्स वेल, राइट। तो उस पर्सपेक्टिव से मुझे ऐसा लग नहीं रहा कि ऐसा कोई बबल सा बर्स्ट हो रहा है। हाँ, वी आर सीइंग अ लॉट ऑफ वैल्यूएशन गोइंग इनटू एआई एंड प्राइमरली सारी एवरीबडी इज गियर टुवर्ड्स एजीआई, कि एजीआई जिसके पास पहले आ जाएगा ही विल बी द रिचेस्ट एंड ही विल बी द ओनली वन सर्वाइविंग एंड स्टफ। सो उस तरह की बहुत सारी कहानियां हैं, वो पता नहीं कितनी सही होंगी नहीं होंगी, बट पॉइंट ये है कि वी हैव सीन this thing happened very recently, 25 years back. Now it's happening all over again and nobody wants to miss the bus, right? So everybody is putting in as much, and जितना मुझे पता है, जितने एक्सपेरिमेंट्स मैंने किए, every single software has to completely change very quickly, right? And not only that, तो होता क्या है कि incremental innovations होते हैं, you do something then you realize अरे ये भी हो सकता है, फिर then you do something else, then you do something else, and ये करते करते आप एक जगह ऐसी जगह पहुंच जाते हो जहाँ पे कि बाकी लोगों के लिए पहुंचना बहुत मुश्किल है, राइट। लेट्स से ऊबर की बात कर लेते हैं। ऊबर जैसी कंपनी, उसने कुछ किया, कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट्स किए, कुछ चीज़ें फेल हुई, कुछ चली, फाइनली वो आज ऐसी जगह पे जिसको फिगर आउट करके बीट कर पाना बहुत कम लोगों के लिए पॉसिबल है, राइट। सो एक्जैक्टली सेम थिंग इज हैपनिंग विद एआई एज वेल। द मोर यू एक्सपेरिमेंट, द मोर यू लर्न एंड द मोर यू विल गो अहेड, दैट्स व्हाट एवरीबडी इज आफ्टर। एंड एवरीबडी जो भी इस फील्ड में है और जो 20-25 साल से सॉफ्टवेयर फील्ड में था, उसको ये पता है कि इट्स गोइंग टू बी ह्यूज डिस्ट्रप्शन, every single thing about software has to change, and not only software, white collar jobs have to first change, and probably in near future even blue collar jobs will change, है ना। तो इसलिए everybody is kind of jumping on this bus and trying to grab as much space as possible and learn as much as quickly as possible. That's what this race is all about. I don't see a bubble happening here, because from where I see, there is so much that AI can do, and AI is going to be like electricity. It's going to be in every single thing that you do, right? तो वैल्यूएशंस बढ़ रही हैं, पैसे बहुत ज़्यादा डाले जा रहे हैं। मैं फाइनेंशियली बहुत एक्सपर्ट नहीं हूँ, मुझे नहीं पता कि इतने वैल्यूएशंस जस्टिफाइड है कि नहीं है, बट इन टर्म्स ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी दिस इज गोइंग टू बी रियली यूजफुल। इवन टुडे जहाँ पे ये है, इट्स वेरी यूजफुल। मैं बहुत सारे लोगों से बहुत बार बोल चुका हूँ भाई, इवन टुडे इफ इनोवेशन स्टॉप्स एट वेयर वी आर राइट नाउ, जो मॉडल्स हमारे पास हैं, 4-5 साल अगर हम उसके ऊपर काम कर पाएँ एज ए सॉफ्टवेयर एप्लीकेशन डेवलपर्स, इतना कुछ अचीव किया जा सकता है कि दैट इटसेल्फ विल बी अमेजिंग। बट अगर आप इसके साथ साथ हर 6 महीने में 10x इंप्रूवमेंट देख रहे हो मॉडल्स में, तो वो तो पता नहीं क्या होने वाला है। सो आई डोंट थिंक आई डोंट सी अ बबल देयर एट ऑल, बट लेट्स सी।
Okay. You mentioned just now कि जिसके पास AGI आ जाएगा, that person will be the winner. What's the current definition of AGI? हम लोगों ने original AGI की जो definition है वो तो discuss कर ली थी, chatbot वाली। Currently AGI, ASI की definition क्या है?
तो AGI की डेफिनेशन हर रोज चेंज हो रही है ना। अगर आप 2 साल पुराना सैम आल्टमैन का इंटरव्यू सुनोगे तो ये हैड अ वेरी डिफरेंट डेफिनेशन. आज उसकी डेफिनेशन कुछ ऐसी है कि शायद 80% ऑफ ऑल जॉब्स या कमर्शियली वायबल जॉब्स जब एआई करने लग जाएगा दैट विल बी. सो एआई एजीआई इज अ टर्म जो हर कोई अपने हिसाब से डिफाइन कर रहा है और मॉडिफाई कर रहा है. द ओनली common factor that I've seen is basically when AI is able to do jobs that we as humans can do, right? And from my perspective, I don't really care about robots coming physical jobs के बारे में I don't really care. अगर अगर as a application computer के अंदर white collar jobs का 70-80% करना शुरू कर दिया उसने, then I think AGI is there, right? So that's what a vague definition for me is, and this definition is pretty much evolving every day for every like lots of people in industry. So but ASI is even आगे. तो अभी basically I don't know maximum IQ humans का शायद जो रिकॉर्ड किया गया है 150-160 के आसपास होता है. और अभी रिसेंटली जो GPT-5 रिलीज हुआ उसका 148 IQ चल रहा है, राइट? सो इट्स ऑलमोस्ट देयर एट द टॉप लेवल. अब ASI बेसिकली देयर अज्यूमिंग कि भाई 10x 1000 के आसपास IQ पहुंच गया. then we as humans can not even think about competing. For example, चेस में अभी बेस्ट चेस इंजन के साथ कोई ह्यूमन नहीं compete कर सकता, राइट? सो इफ द सेम थिंग हैपन्स with all generalized tasks, software development, let's say lawyer, let's say doctors, उस तरह की सारी चीज़ों में अगर मॉडल्स करने लग गए और बेसिकली तो दैट्स वेयर ASI इज, देन बेसिकली इट विल स्टार्ट डिस्कवर. तो मुझे नहीं पता बट एलॉन मस्क और इन सब के हिसाब से दे विल स्टार्ट डिस्कवरिंग न्यू फिजिक्स, न्यू साइंस एंड न्यू मैथ्स, एंड सो दैट्स व्हाट ASI वुड डू, एंड देन विल बी जस्ट ऑन द साइडलाइन सिटिंग वाचिंग.
Okay, that was really interesting. Let's come back now. So हम लोग डिस्कस कर रहे थे चार्टबॉट्स के बारे में कि चार्टबॉट्स काफी इंटरेस्टिंग चीज थी 10 years पहले AGI से रिलेटेड कि कौन से चार्टबॉट सबसे रियलिस्टिक बात कर पाता है. सो अब लार्ज लैंग्वेज मॉडल LLMs है क्या, वो चार्टबॉट से डिफरेंट कैसे?
तो जब हम लोग चैटबॉट मतलब बिकॉज वी वर मेकिंग चैटबॉट एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम 2017-18 की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं, है ना? तो उस समय हम लोग क्या करते थे कि भाई यूज़र ने क्या बोला, हमारे पास कुछ पाइथन लाइब्रेरीज होती थी, यूज़र ने क्या बोला उसमें से इंटेंट निकालने की कोशिश करते थे. उस इंटेंट के बेसिस पे फिर उसमें कौन से नाउन्स हैं, कौन से प्रोनाउंस हैं, उस तरह की चीज़ें निकालने की कोशिश करते थे. फिर फिगर आउट करते थे अच्छा उस नाउन या फिर, तो वी हैड टू डू अ लॉट ऑफ वर्क फ्लो काइंड ऑफ इम्प्लीमेंटेशन कि यूज़र ने क्या बोला, राइट? उसमें से अपने मतलब की बात निकालो, उसको पुश करो और उसके बेस पे क्वेश्चन डिफाइन करो और फिर उसमें से आंसर निकाल के चैटबॉट की तरह फिर ह्यूमनाइज्ड आंसर रिस्पॉन्ड करो, राइट? अब LLM के आने से क्या हुआ कि LLM इज अ लार्ज लैंग्वेज मॉडल जहाँ पे आपने इनपुट उसको दिया और उसने आपको आउटपुट दिया. यू डोंट रियली हैव टू केयर अबाउट ऑल ऑफ दो स्टेप्स जो आप मैनुअली कर रहे थे जस्ट टू ह्यूमनाइज और फिगर आउट आंसर्स, है ना? तो ब्रॉडली केवल अगर हम LLM की बात करें, LLM एज ए चैटबॉट, तो वो यही करता है. भाई आपने क्वेश्चन दिया, उसके पास वर्ल्ड नॉलेज है, उसके पास इंग्लिश की नॉलेज है, कैसे रिस्पॉन्ड करना है उसने रिस्पॉन्ड कर दिया. उसके ऊपर आप रैग बना लो या उसके ऊपर आप अपने एप्लीकेशन का डेटा वेटा प्रोवाइड कर दो तो इट बिकम्स अ डिफरेंट थिंग. बट अगर हम केवल चैटबॉट की बात करें तो जहाँ पे हम इतने सारे वर्क फ्लो वगैरह इंप्लीमेंट कर रहे थे वो सब करने की जरूरत नहीं है. एक LLM लगाया जिसको 8 बिलियन पैरामीटर्स या 14 बिलियन पैरामीटर्स वाला LLM भी इतनी इंटरेस्टिंग बातें कर सकता है. यू आर नॉट बी एबल टू फिगर आउट वेदर इट्स ह्यूमन और नॉट. तो दैट्स व्हाट इट इज.
सो अल्टीमेटली ये जो टर्म LLM है, LLM, हाउ डज एन LLM वर्क?
Okay, that is a very not as straightforward. It will take a little bit of time for me to explain this whole thing, but कोशिश करके देख लेते हैं. थोड़ा सा डीपर जाना पड़ेगा. LLM कैसे काम करता है. पहले तो ये जानते हैं कि LLM होता क्या है. तुझे क्या लगता है LLM क्या होता है?
अगर मुझे एक लाइन में एक्सप्लेन करना होगा LLM क्या है, a chatbot that can think for itself before answering.
हाँ वो ठीक है, मतलब थिंक फॉर इटसेल्फ वो भी बहुत लोडेड चीज़ हो गई. कुछ थिंकिंग LLMs होते हैं, कुछ नॉन थिंकिंग LLMs होते हैं, राइट? सो तो अगर ठीक है, मैं कोशिश ये करता हूँ कि जितना ज़्यादा लेमैन टर्म्स में LLM तक पहुँच पाऊँगा वो पहुँचने की कोशिश करता हूँ. बट थोड़ी सी मैथ्स आएगी शायद, कोशिश करता हूँ कि वो भी कम से कम आए, बट ठीक है. तो न्यूरल नेटवर्क पता है तुझे क्या होता है?
नहीं, आप एक बार मुझे बता दो।
न्यूरल नेटवर्क नहीं पता है? ओके। मैथ में क्वाड्रेटिक इक्वेशन क्या होती है वो पता है?
हाँ।
हम्म, ठीक है। तो अगर मुझे ये पता है कि अगर मुझे लेट्स से कोई भी शेप, किसी भी शेप को एक एक मैथमेटिकल फॉर्मूले से रिप्रेजेंट करना है तो हम कर सकते हैं या नहीं कर सकते? तुझे तूने सुना है? तो हम लोग जब 10th में थे तो हमारे, विच वॉज वेरी अमेजिंग फॉर अस एट दैट पॉइंट टाइम, हमारे मैथ्स टीचर ने एक बार बोला कि ये जो जैसे ये पेड़ लगा हुआ है पीछे, इस पेड़ का एग्जैक्ट जो इसका पेरिफेरी है या सर्कमफ्रेंस जैसे ही बोले, अगर वो आप ड्रॉ करो तो देयर कैन बी मैथमेटिकल फॉर्मूला दैट कैन रिप्रेजेंट दिस एग्जैक्टली। ठीक है। तो उस समय तो वो बात उन्होंने बोली और हम लोग वी वर अमेज्ड एंड वी वर लाइक हाँ यार ऐसा पॉसिबल भी है क्या? वी वर लाइक स्केप्टिकल कि यार ये तो नहीं पॉसिबल हो सकता यार, ये तो बहुत ही कॉम्प्लेक्स शेप है, इस शेप को कैसे कोई मैथमेटिकल फॉर्मूला रिप्रेजेंट कर सकता है, राइट? बट देन व्हेन आई वाज रीडिंग अबाउट एआई इन, सो वो चीज़ वहाँ छूट गई थी। उसके बाद जब मैं वापस से 2018 में एआई के बारे में करना शुरू किया, मैंने न्यूरल नेटवर्क्स के बारे में कर रहा था, तो विच इज़ वेयर आई रियलाइज कि क्वाड्रेटिक इक्वेशन बेसिकली सर्कल या पैराबोला या उस तरह की चीज़ों को रिप्रेजेंट कर सकता है। द मोमेंट यू स्टार्ट इंक्रीजिंग पावर ऑफ एक्स, यू गो टू थर्ड पावर, फोर्थ पावर, फिफ्थ पावर, तो आप जैसा चाहो उस तरह का कर्व बना सकते हो। दैट वॉज प्रीटी मच द फर्स्ट टाइम आई रियलाइज दैट, राइट? अब अगर आप बहुत सारे डायमेंशंस ऐड कर दो तो इसको करने के लिए इस पेड़ का एग्जैक्ट अगर मैं ड्राइंग बनाने की कोशिश करूं तो हो सकता है कि x की 10 या 15 पावर में मैं ऐसा फंक्शन बना पाऊँ जो एग्जैक्ट हो सकता है उतनी दूर जाने की ना पड़े, हो सकता है 7th 8th पावर पे ही मिल जाए। तो बेसिकली होता है कि एक मैथमेटिकल फंक्शन ऐसा हो सकता है जो किसी भी शेप को डिफाइन कर सकता है, ठीक है? और पूरी की पूरी मशीन लर्निंग या डीप लर्निंग इसी फैक्ट पे बेस्ड है, ठीक? तो अब अगर मैं इस एग्जाम्पल से बाहर या इसी एग्जाम्पल को मैं यूज करता हूँ, मैं तुझे ये बोलता हूँ भाई एक ये पॉइंट है, ठीक है? ये पॉइंट इस पेड़ से बाहर है,
हाँ।
ठीक? अब आप एक मैथमेटिकल फॉर्मूला ऐसा डिफाइन करो जो ये बता पाए कि ये पॉइंट इस पेड़ के बाहर है और ये वाला पॉइंट इस पेड़ पे, ठीक? तो अगर आपने वो मैथमेटिकल फॉर्मूला डिफाइन कर दिया कि ये पेड़ क्या है, कैसे 3 डायमेंशन में, राइट? तो फिर आप हमेशा बता पाओगे ये पॉइंट बाहर है, ये पॉइंट अंदर है, ठीक? तो इसी फंडे पे पूरी की पूरी मशीन लर्निंग और डीप लर्निंग बेस करती है और इसी फंडे को अल्टीमेटली वो ये बोलते हैं कि हमारे दिमाग में भी यही चलता है, ठीक है? तो हम इसको पेड़ क्यों बोल रहे हैं? क्योंकि हमारे दिमाग ने इसको देखा और उसने एक फॉर्मूला बना रखा है कि अच्छा इस शेप का होगा तो ये पेड़ है, तो उसने फिट किया उस फॉर्मूले को क्विकली, राइट? सिमिलरली अगर कंप्यूटर को हमने वो फॉर्मूला समझा दिया कि भाई तुम इस तरह को शेप दिखे तो पेड़ मान लो, और यहाँ पे कोई चीज़ लटकी है जो किसी टच में नहीं है, देन यू से भाई ये तो बाहर है, जो कि हम मैनुअली भी करेंगे, है ना? तो एग्जैक्टली सेम थिंग न्यूरल नेटवर्क्स यही करते हैं कि एक्स की पावर कितने न्यूरॉन्स आपने लगाए हैं उतनी एक्स की पावर बढ़ती चली जा रही है, ठीक है? तो उतना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड शेप वो रिप्रेजेंट कर पाएंगे, ठीक है? तो मैं न्यूरल नेटवर्क के शेप पे नहीं जा रहा हूँ, बट मैं बस ये बता रहा हूँ कि मैथमेटिकली वो एक ऐसा फॉर्मूला डिफाइन करते रहते हैं कि इस फॉर्मूले से अगर इस शेप को डिफाइन करना है या इस शेप को डिफाइन करना है या उस शेप को या इन सारे शेप्स को डिफाइन करना है, तब मैं कौन सा फॉर्मूला बनाऊंगा, तब मैं और जेनरिक फॉर्मूला बनाऊंगा, है ना? तो इन सारे शेप्स के बाहर ये पॉइंट कि अंदर ये पॉइंट, राइट? वो बताने के लिए अगर मेरे पास ये पूरा पेड़ है, ये पूरा फॉर्मूला है, तो मैं बता पाऊंगा। तो एग्जैक्टली सेम थिंग न्यूरल नेटवर्क जितने कॉम्प्लेक्स आप बनाते चले जाते हो उतनी कॉम्प्लेक्स इंफॉर्मेशन के अराउंड वो अपना एक फॉर्मूला बना लेते हैं। अब जब आप बोलते हो कि ये इन्फॉर्मेशन वेदर दिस इज ट्रू और फॉल्स, तो क्योंकि उसने पूरे इंटरनेट का डेटा पढ़ लिया, उसने वो फॉर्मूला बना लिया, आपने पूछा ये सही है कि नहीं है, उसने इस फॉर्मूले से देखा कि अच्छा यहाँ पे मैच कर रहा है कि नहीं कर रहा है मैच, तो दिस इज रॉन्ग। तो इसलिए मतलब काफ़ी सारे लोग इस चीज़ पे कंफ्यूज रहते हैं कि यार मशीन लर्न कैसे कर सकती है, राइट? तो मशीन को एक एरर फंक्शन दे देते हैं जिसके बेस पे ये फिगर आउट करते रहता है भाई ये चीज़ सही है कि गलत है, ये सही है गलत है, उसके हिसाब से वो फॉर्मूला डिफाइन करते रहते हैं। तो पूरे इंटरनेट की नॉलेज दे दी जिसके बेस पे उसने 10 बिलियन पैरामीटर या 100 बिलियन पैरामीटर या 600 700 1000 बिलियन पैरामीटर्स का एक फॉर्मूला डिफाइन कर दिया। अब आपने एक इन्फॉर्मेशन दी, उसने उस फॉर्मूले से चेक किया कि भाई इस फॉर्मूले में फिट बैठ रहा है कि नहीं कर रहा, नहीं बैठ रहा तो ये गलत है, बैठ रहा तो ये सही है, ठीक? अब न्यूरल नेटवर्क की ट्रेनिंग कैसे होती है, क्या होता है, वो बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स प्रोसेस। तो बेसिकली न्यूरल नेटवर्क ये करता है फॉर्मूले बेसिस वाला। अब LLM इज ए स्पेशलाइज्ड टाइप ऑफ न्यूरल नेटवर्क, है ना? जैसे पहले 2017-18 की जैसे मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, तो उसमें CNNs होते थे जो कि विजन वाले रिलेटेड चीज़ें करते थे, और रिकरेंट न्यूरल नेटवर्क्स RNNs होते थे जो अलग काम करते थे। तो वो करते करते एक ट्रांसफॉर्मर आर्किटेक्चर निकल के आया। उस ट्रांसफॉर्मर आर्किटेक्चर को एक्चुअली गूगल में रिसर्च हुई थी जिसमें ये निकल के आया था। उसके बाद फिर एक पेपर आया था अटेंशन इज एवरीथिंग, तो अटेंशन इन तीनों चीज़ों को मिला करके फिर बेसिकली एलएलएम्स एक लोअर लेवल पे बनाया ओपन एआई ने, जिसको देखा कि अच्छा थोड़ा बड़ा काम कर पा रहे हैं, देन दे स्टार्टेड एक्सपैंडिंग ऑन इट। तो आज हमारे सामने एलएलएम, तो एलएलएम इज नथिंग बट अ ह्यूज फार्मूला। अगर हम बहुत सिंपल सी बात समझें, उस फॉर्मूले में आपने एक इनपुट दिया, वो आपको एक आउटपुट देगा, दैट्स व्हाट इट इज।
ओके, तो फिर अगर हम एक सिंपल टर्म्स में एक्सप्लेन करेंगे एलएलएम काम कैसे करता है, तो वो फिर निकल के आएगा।
तो बहुत सिंपल टर्म्स में, मतलब अगर हम एप्लीकेशन प्रोग्रामर की तरह बात करें तो हम मान लेते हैं कि एक ब्लैक बॉक्स है, जैसे लाइब्रेरीज होती हैं पाइथन में, कि इस पाइथन की लाइब्रेरी को ये इनपुट दिया तो ये ऐसा आउटपुट देती है। अगर आपको डेवलपमेंट करना है, आपको केवल एप्लीकेशन पे काम करना है, तो दैट्स वेरी सिंपल एंड ब्लैक बॉक्स काइंड ऑफ थिंग। आपने इसको कोई सवाल दिया तो ये इंटेलिजेंट आंसर्स दे सकता है, दैट्स व्हाट इट इज। ये प्रोग्राम लिख सकता है, ये इस तरीके से वो आप मान लोगे, देन यू कैन स्टार्ट वर्किंग ऑन इट। तो आपको डीपर जाने की जरूरत नहीं है। डीपर जाना है तो थोड़ा सा न्यूरल नेटवर्क के बारे में जान लोगे, उसी का एक ट्रांसफॉर्मर आर्किटेक्चर है न्यूरल नेटवर्क्स का, उसके ऊपर एलएलएम काम कर रहा है, अगर उसके अंदर काम करना चाहते हो तो।
ओके, सो अभी पिछले कुछ मंथ से हर मंथ एक नई टर्म हमारे पास निकल के आती है एआई से रिलेटेड। जैसे अभी चल रहा है अगस्त, फरवरी मार्च के आसपास एक टर्म बहुत ज्यादा फेमस हो रही थी, वाइब कोडिंग। हर स्ट्रीमर, हर यूट्यूबर, एवरी इन्फ्लुएंसर वाज टॉकिंग अबाउट इट। सो व्हाट अल्टीमेटली इज वाइब कोडिंग?
तो वाइब कोडिंग प्राइमरली Andrej Karpathy is the person who first used this term, and he kind of posted something on Twitter. So basically, when you're vibing with the code, basically you're not putting conscious brain into something, but you're vibing with it, right? And you end up developing something. That's what vibe coding was. But abhi mostly जो लोग use कर रहे हैं, basically they discuss with LLM what requirement they have, and LLM starts writing code for them, और फिर they use that code primarily, they run it. If it works, well and good. If not, they face some problem, they go back to LLM, tell LLM that this is the problem. LLM tries to solve it, gives you a new piece of code, or it kind of solves that problem in the code itself. Then you try to use it, and then you figure out, okay, this was a feature that is missing here, let me add that feature. So basically you are interacting. So LLM is primarily acting as somebody who's writing code for you, right? You are just mostly reviewing the code, mostly you're looking at the features that is being developed, and then you're suggesting new changes in that feature, and you're getting it done with LLM. That primarily is the way why coding currently works.
Okay, well, that's fair. But what I want to know is, as someone, I just completed my first year, right? I'm a sophomore now, and I don't know a lot of coding at the moment. So is it possible that I can make full-fledged products just by vibe coding? Are the LLMs at that level at this moment?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, and that will take another long-winded answer, right? Because a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds are kind of dealing with similar question. कुछ लोग हैं जो एकदम like you who are still doing their engineering. There are some people who are already in the industry who are doing the similar thing, have a similar question. There are people like me as well who've spent like 20-25 years in an industry, and then they are dealing with a similar thing, right? So my thing is basically, if you are currently in, let's say, in the college, है ना? तो you need, मतलब there is a lot of debate going on whether you guys should learn coding or not. My thing is you still need to learn coding. So if it does nothing else, it at least gives you a way, a framework to think about problems, right? A very logical, a very well-defined framework to think about problems, how to solve it. So that is what you learn. At least if you don't learn the syntax and everything else, you at least learn that from coding, right? But while you're doing that, along with this process of thinking, of solving the problem, you try to learn the bigger. So when we started work, we were working on C++, right? We had to think about very, very minute things like, how to manage memory, how to manage pointers, how to manage, all of that. When the higher level languages came in, people didn't have to think about all of that. People only had to think about, you get a variable, you assign values there, and then you basically, do basically functional programming. Whatever is required from the business logic, you only focus on that, right? So programming itself has been progressing from, where we had to focus. So initially guys started with assembly language. There you had to think about registers and everything. Then it came to C, C++, then it came to Java, and then it came to probably PHP and everything else, which is very high level language. You don't have to think about memory and everything. Now it has come to a point where you can probably do a lot of coding with English as it is, right? You just talk to LLM in terms of English, and it does the code for you. But the point is, as an engineering graduate, one is you learn coding to understand how you get the basically how to think logically about a problem. Second thing is, what are the technical terms being used, right? For example, what is backend, what is front end, what is database, what does it do, and then within that front end backend, what is MVC, what is model context. MVC is model view controller, right? Model context protocol is what I work on these days. So that's what. So basically, what are different frameworks? What is event-driven architecture? So you have to understand those things. So the Lego block for coding has become a little bigger for you in terms of that. You need to know some architectures. You need to know what are the bigger things. For example, what is database? What is backend coding? What is front end supposed to do? What is RESTful API? Those kind of bigger items that fit into a software program, right? So once you understand those things, then you can talk intelligently to the LLM, ask it to create a RESTful API rather than create something like Netflix for me. One is that question, which is very layman's kind of question. The other thing could be, design something which has a front end of Netflix, and then create a RESTful API which will talk to my database, which has got movies database, and it pulls out that information and fits into this UI, right? When you talk like that, LLM will be able to give you something a lot better compared to you asking it generate something like Netflix for me, right? So the moment you learn programming a little bit, you're able to talk intelligently to LLM, you're able to get much better answers, right? So at least from your perspective, at least from people who are doing engineering still, they should learn at least one language. They should do some hands-on programming. They should understand about software engineering. They should understand about, let's say, a little bit of DevOps, how to deploy it on the cloud, how to deploy those applications, how do we access it, a little bit about everything, right? So that you get a bigger picture, and then you can get it done with LLM. That's what would help. If somebody's already in an industry, let's say they've spent like 3, 4, 5 years, they know these terms already, then they can start getting this done by LLMs rather than, like I gave the example of Netflix again, rather than giving it just one thing and give the whole thing in one shot. Start asking it for writing a particular piece of function, particular piece of class, particular piece of abstraction layer, right? वो चीजें करवा के then you assemble it. You get it assembled by the LLM itself, but ultimately you go a little more in detail about figuring out that what functionalities have to be there. And for people like who are from my generation, my recommendation is go back and write a little bit of refresh your knowledge of code, then get something written by LLM and execute it and see how it works, so that you get back to that level, and then you can start guiding people, right? Because people at my level are mostly involved in guiding people, but unless you know what exactly is going on there, you'll probably not be able to guide properly. So that has to happen.
Okay. So nowadays there are a lot of products that market themselves as you just write one line and we create the entire application, entire website for you. And some of them are really good. I've tried a couple of them, and basically new products are launched every single day. You can't keep track of that. Another thing that we have is AI powered IDEs. That is something, the best product in the market at the moment is Cursor AI.
Okay.
And there are a lot of products for that in that market as well. We've got Windsor, we've got Kiro, which was developed by AWS, and Kiro was launched like 2 weeks ago actually.
Okay.
So what do you think? Should students use these AI-powered IDEs which help us write code? You can just press the tab button and it will write the next line for you. It will suggest what function you should add next. You think we should use that?
So basically, yeah, the tools are coming almost every day, and you probably know more of those tools than I do, right? So I've heard about Cursor, I've heard about Windsor. Then we were at Codefire, we were using Continue.dev, so I know about that. That's a plugin to Visual Studio, right? I haven't used whole lot of them myself, right? But like I said before, that you have to, as a student, switch off everything at least once, at least for let's say one semester, and then you start writing code. It will be a slow process. It will take a lot of time. You'll probably not be able to do a lot of things, right? But that's okay. Spend 3 to 6 months learning the nuances of programming manually, completely, right? When you're facing problems, you could probably go to ChatGPT or Claude or anywhere, that whatever you like, right? And ask about that and read the text also that it writes rather than just copying and pasting the code. Because convince yourself that this is the learning curve. This is where you have, once you learn it, then you not have to do this slow process again. But at least, for those 3 to 6 months, completely focus on doing it manually as much as possible, right? Once you've done that, if you've understood the basics of the coding, then it's okay to use those kind of tools that do a tab completion or write the complete function just based on a prompt. I don't really care at that point. But unless you've done this 3 or 6 months kind of thing, doing just that may not help. I would not say it will not help, because there are so many different types of people and everybody does not need a whole lot of coding knowledge, right? But if at all you want to do well technically and you are technically bent basically, then I would think at least 6 months you have to devote to writing code by hand. And then that will make you so fast once you start coming using LLMs later on, that you'll not even realize, like, why. I mean, then you'll probably enjoy the fact that you spend those 6 months, and this is how. Because I mean, there could be the other way as well. You keep doing it along with that, and you learn. So the learning would be a lot slower at times. You'd probably not even learn some of the important concepts. I don't know if that would be the right path. At least from my perspective, spending those 3 to 6 months directly with the code, whether it's Python, whether it's Java, whatever, just select one language, spend some time to understand nuances of the language, and then you could do it with any language with the help of LLM. That's what my thought is.
So I should just stick to Visual Studio Code without any extensions.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And one thing that I mentioned previously was every month we get a new term related to AI, right? So the past 2-3 months we've been hearing about agentic AI agents. What is an AI agent? How is it different from LLM?
So LLM, like we said, is intelligence, right? Agents are like, so we used to hear the word agent. For example, somebody was showing me property, there's an agent that does something for movie stars, and so everybody used to have agent who would do something specific for them, right? Exactly same term has been copied over for AI as well. So now I can have agent that will get a task done for me. It will probably be just one task, or it could be multiple types of tasks depending on kind of agent it is. But agent is somebody or some piece of program that will accomplish the task for me, right? Now, I've done a YouTube video about AI agents as well. So basically, the very simple example, like I was talking to you yesterday or day before yesterday, right? You had written a program which does your timetable kind of thing, right? And you were thinking it's an agent, right? So do you want to talk about what we discussed around that?
So I'll just explain what I made. So I got Gemini to write a code for me, and this piece of code, what it does is it would ask the user for a PNG file, save that file, send it to OpenAI, and OpenAI O4 model, it's an OCR, and with this OCR API, it would convert the text from the image into a JSON file, and depending on the date, day, and time, it would add that whatever is the text is in that image, it will add that to my calendar.
Right.
This is what I believe was that I made an AI agent, because I am giving it. I've written a code. It is doing something for me. it's an agent for me.
Right. So basically, you've written a piece of code that uses AI and gives you at what date, what time, what class you have to attend. That's what you're getting out of it, right?
Right.
And you were calling it a timetable agent for yourself, right?
Yep.
Now, basically, like we discussed earlier, agent is something which is very flexible. So there are two different things: AI workflows and AI agent. In your case, it's a very well-defined workflow where you take a PNG, you pass it to a LLM, it converts from PNG into a JSON file, you save that JSON file, and now you run a program or a scheduled program runs that picks up the classes that you have to attend and it puts it on your calendar every week or every day or whenever, right? So it's just doing a very well-defined workflow that once the JSON is there, it'll pull it out from there. It'll know what date today is, what date tomorrow is, and what day is that, and then it'll put it there, right?
Right.
So it's just a simple program which is using LLM, which is probably not even a very elaborate workflow as well, but at least it's a program that uses LLM. So it's not an agent at all. Now, how I would define an agent? Let's say the example that we talked about yesterday as well. Let's say I want you to get something from the market, right? Now I tell you, basically you should go get something from the market, right? You are intelligent enough to figure out what exactly that thing is, how much it will cost you, do you have that much amount of money or not? If you don't have that much money, you'll probably ask for that from your mom or from me before you go to the market, right? You'll get that money, and then if the shop is nearby, you'll go on foot. If the shop is far off, you'll probably drive there, or so you'll define you'll define the mode of transport as well, right? So you are an intelligent person who figures out how to get something done.
Correct.
And it's not in any particular order, but broadly you know that you have to get money and then you have to go somehow and then you have to get the item and come back, right? So that's more like agentic work. I have just given you a task that Akshay, I need this thing, and then you figure out everything else and you get that task done depending on what all. If you've got a car today, you'll probably drive. If you don't have a car, you'll probably get an Uber or something, right? So you figure out the modalities and you accomplish the task. But if I wanted to do the same thing in the workflow format, then I would tell you, Akshun, I need to get this. For that, you have to ask your mom for money, and then you have to go on foot to this shop, and then you have to get it, and then you have to come back and give the remaining change back to your mom and give me the item, right? If I define it in such an elaborate way, then you are not applying any brains, you're just executing the task, right? So that's more of a workflow kind of thing, right? So I don't know if that example makes it clear or not, but agent is something where you give the task, you give the tools, and it accomplishes in the best possible manner that it can think of.
Okay, right. So till now we've discussed about LLMs. Now we've gone further, we've discussed about AI agents. So LLMs were initially just something that could help us with about our questions, about researching. It was kind of a companion, it was a helper, right?
Mm.
AI agent is something that can get our tasks done for us. So recently, Perplexity actually launched its own AI browser. It's called the Perplexity Comet, and I actually got the access to it yesterday, and I was playing around with it, and I found it fascinating. Wow. I asked it to just go to Twitter and write a tweet for me.
Wow!
And it was able to do that flawlessly. It opened a new tab. It went to my Twitter. It clicked on create a new post, and it just wrote this tweet is being written by Perplexity. Wow.
So did you try anything else as well?
I tried a lot of things. I just so I gave it the URL to my university website, and I asked it who my roommate is.
Okay.
It was able to navigate itself to the hostel management tab and give me all the details about my roommate. It's his phone number, his name.
So was it able to log in on its own? Like how did it happen?
So I had to log in before it could access it, but once everything was logged in, it was able to navigate on its own. It was able to figure out everything on its own.
Wow, that's awesome. So basically, that's a very interesting example of AI agent, right? Yeah, you've got first-hand experience with that. Did you try anything else interesting with that?
Yeah, so I realized that Google had some restrictions on what it could do on their companies. Basically, it could not write a comment on YouTube
Okay.
and some other things. But another interesting thing was I asked it to go to Instagram, go to my liked reel folder, and tell me what was the last reel that I liked about.
Okay.
And the last reel I liked was a very interesting reel. It was a cow that had a painting of a man and a woman.
Okay.
So, firstly, it was able to go to Instagram, it was able to go to settings, and finally, when it figured out that it was on the liked content page, it wasn't able to figure out the difference between a reel and a post. And because I had specified that I wanted the last reel that I liked, there was no setting that could about the time and date. So it had to guess if the top reel was the last reel that I liked or the bottom one. It so that was a gamble and it paid off. It selected the correct reel and it was able to describe the reel perfectly.
So that's a pretty complex task, right? Yeah, I mean, going to Instagram, first of all, so you're logged in, it probably went to the Instagram. I'm not on Instagram, so I don't know how it works, but basically, so then figuring out, so at least for me, if you tell me that task for me to do, I'll have to go to Instagram, I'll have to figure out what a reel is, probably. I'll have to probably figure out some ways to get to the last liked reel, and then I'll have to look at the whether it's a video or an image, and then understand it and probably give it to you, right?
Right.
That's a lot of things to be done. So was it able to do it correctly or?
So one thing that I forgot to mention was initially it wasn't able to find the last reel, so it just clicked on on the cross at the top and it shut everything down. Then it realized that it made a mistake, so it opened that same tab again. It went to that page and it was able to finally reduce everything correctly.
Wow.
That was the most interesting thing.
So were you able to like watch the whole process while it was doing it, like, or it happens in the background? How does it work?
You basically get an option if you want to watch that process, and because I was pretty new to this stuff, I decided to click on that, and it was like seeing a child figuring things out, but the child has the brain of an adult. It was like an alien for me.
Wow, that is super interesting. I mean, so we've also been trying to write some. So we started with writing some AI agents, which were like you specifically ask it to go to Perplexity and search about something and report it back to you. So those were kind of simple tasks. Now we've gone to migrated to long horizon tasks where, so one of the questions that I gave to one of my agents was find the YouTube channel of my YouTube channel, which is YouTube channel of CEO of Code5 Technologies. For you to be able to figure that out, you have to figure out who the CEO of the Code5 Technologies is, and then you search on YouTube. You get so many channels, then you have to filter it by Code5 Technologies, and a little bit. It was not very complicated, but it was not very easy, which is where some of our agents are able to do it now, right? So, but I've realized that Perplexity is kind of fine tuning some of the models, or probably writing some of the models that do it from scratch. So hopefully we'll be doing that soon. But yeah, this is very interesting. The browser, I've heard a lot about Comet. Good that you got first-hand experience with that. So you're totally blown away, it seems.
Yeah. So last night I was just on YouTube watching some videos, car-related videos, and the AI assistant popped up and it asked me if I wanted to fact check whatever the host is talking about. I clicked.
No. Let me just try to understand. So you're saying you were on Comet.
Yeah.
You were watching some YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And then automatically came in.
I clicked on the assistant tab initially, and this small chatbot opened on the side of the page, and it figured out what video I was watching, obviously, and then a suggestion popped up at the bottom saying if I wanted to fact check whatever the host was talking about.
Wow.
I decided to click on that, and it turns out it gave me a whole essay. It showed me a few blogs about that car, about that specific feature, and it turns out the host was correct.
So does that mean the moment you enabled the assistant, it was listening or watching the same thing that you were?
Because it was already in the browser, I think it probably had the access to whatever.
Wow. So that's like a privacy, a huge privacy thing, right? I mean, what I'm doing on my browser is, you have to always think about, maybe it was already happening, maybe Chrome or Google somebody was always watching what you were watching, But then this is a little creepy for me that if I'm watching a video, there is an assistant who's watching with me at the same time and probably answering questions. Yeah, it's a borderline creepy for me. I don't know. I would want that or not. Yeah, very, very difficult. But probably if lots of people end up doing it, everybody else will follow and will not care about privacy. So let's see how that goes. That's very interesting. Yeah, I'll have to try that browser maybe.
So yeah, Perplexity Comet, it's the most interesting thing that I've tried in a long time. The last thing that kind of blew me away was Google Fireship or Firebase. It was basically an AI builder, but it was incredibly intelligent.
Firebase, as much as I know, is a service for notification and all for Android applications. So I'm not really sure if that's Firebase. Maybe Fireship or something else. Yeah, I mean, I keep hearing about lots of terms from you, Lovable and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But I have personally not tried any of those. I prefer writing my own code and do things on my own rather than, and I've got a philosophy around that. But that's okay. That's another rabbit hole we'll have to get into. But yeah, I've not tried. So, any other application that you want to talk about that you've tried and you've liked?
It's Firebase Studio, I believe, the actual name of the product.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the thing is, there are so many new products being launched every single day that it's so hard to keep track of. And it's fun to see the bigger products fail as well. Builder AI, it was recently.
Yeah. So lots of Indians were writing code, writing code for them, and they were like, "Yeah, they're super fast. They write code." Wow. Yep.
So
anything else that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I've got my notes here. Just give me a second.
Sure.
So you were talking. So basically, when we were discussing about AI-powered IDEs, you mentioned the term MCP, Model Context Protocol, by mistake actually.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know what that is, because I came across this Anthropic's YouTube channel, and there was this video, and the host was talking about an internal hackathon that happened at Anthropic, and they just coined the term MCP, and they said that every single employee at Anthropic built an MCP of their own. What is MCP? What's Model Context Protocol?
Okay, so again, so everybody's been trying to write agents for last probably a year or so. Okay, so we were trying to, at least I was trying to write agents in last year, September, October time frame. And so going back to programming for a bit, right? What happens is when you, let's say there is a function let's say there's an API that can, let's say, transcribe my video into text. Okay. Let's say there's an API which I call from my program. I can pass it MP3 and it will transcribe that MP3 into text file. Okay. Now, let's say I want to write a AI driven program. I'll not call it agent at least for now, but let's say. So what I will have to AI driven program which will understand what user is saying. Okay, user is interacting with the program using his voice. Okay, so that program will have to understand the speech from the user, understand what he's saying, and then it will have to process that and respond back. Okay, let's say I have to implement that using just Python. Let's not get into MCP. So what I'll have to do is I get that sound, I use this API, I write code to use this API. Right, this will be sent to the API. It will come back in a text format. Now I've got text format. I can pass this back to an API, which is LLM, which will figure out what needs to be done. That will tell me, this is what the user is asking, and then probably another function call to accomplish whatever the user was asking, and then send it back to the user. Right. So these function calls are coded in my application, and I have well-defined flow that the call comes in, this happens, and then it's done. Okay. Now going to the next level. If I want to detach these function calls, I don't want the function calls to be written down in the code. I know that I've got API to convert voice to text, right? I've got that API. I've got an API to send to LLM. I've got an API to get the task done, right? If I've got these three different things and I don't write static code to call these APIs, I can somehow tell my code to call these functions or these APIs when required, right? That will be very interesting because the code is not hard coded that this API, this function has to be called. The code intelligently figures out what function I have to call at what point, right? So that's how we were kind of coding in September, October last year, where we would describe that I've got this function does transcribing job, I've got this function calls the LLM, and then I've got this. So I would write some text notes around that, and then I'll pass it on to my LLM that will dynamically generate that call. So what MCP did was MCP gave you a very interesting framework to write those descriptions so LLMs can use it. So everybody was trying to write agents. Everybody was trying to do the same thing, providing those texts to the program to figure out which function to call. MCP gave you a very structured protocol how to define those functions so LLMs can easily use it. The moment MCP came in, it became so easy for LLM developers to optimize. So there's something called tool calling. I don't know if you've heard that word or not. You've not heard, right? Tool calling is nothing but just a function call.
Okay.
Okay. The way we write our code, if I have to call a function, I'll call a function, right? Now, in terms of when you're doing something with AI, the function calling is called tool calling. Okay. And there's another term which is called instruction following. What is that? I mean, for example, if I give you a set of instructions that Akshan, do not do this, let's say do this and then do this, and so a set of instructions, if you follow those instructions, you'll be able to get the task done, right? That's called instruction following in terms of LLM. Okay, so tool calling and instruction following. Okay. Now, tool calling is same as this function which I've defined, which it has to call. So if there's an LLM which is very good with tool calling, then it will be able to call that tool whenever required. If not required, it will not call it, right? So basically this definition of the function that we were passing to the LLM, MCP kind of gives you a protocol, how you have to define it. The moment that protocol was defined, it became so easy for LLM providers to do this tool calling, optimize their LLM for tool calling, right? So that's why MCP, I don't know if I've explained it well enough or not, but that's where MCP was very interesting and everybody kind of needed it for agent creation. And that's where it provided a standard for us as developers and for LLM providers as well to optimize their programs, to train it, fine tune it on those parameters so that it can call tools easily, right? So that's what MCP broadly is. It gives you a framework or protocol to define what function does, what parameters it takes, what responses it gives back, and it has to be JSON 2.0 format.
Okay. So I had a couple of questions and then maybe we can wrap it up. So tokens is something that is really important nowadays. It's basically the currency, you can say, right? So one thing is Claude Code actually, yesterday itself only, Claude Code CLI, they gave us 1 million tokens per session, and in fact, if you use AI Studio, you've got 1 million tokens as well. It sounds very interesting and it's very useful to a point, but after you've used up 80,000 or 100,000 tokens, the model is not able to solve the problems really well.
Okay.
If you know what I mean. So the problem solving of the model suffers after you've used up like 1/10 of the token. So is there really a point to having 1 million tokens if I can't really go beyond 70,000-80,000?
So basically, one thing that you've said is very interesting for me. So you're saying Cloud Code CLI up to 1 million tokens is free? Is that what you're saying?
It's not free, it's a paid service, but you get 1 million tokens basically.
Oh, so you're talking about the context window now,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so context window is a very interesting thing. So one is token. What is a token, right? So we as humans understand words and then sentences, right? LLMs understand tokens. Tokens is roughly 4 alphabets or 4 characters form a token. Okay, so that's token. Now, context window is a very interesting thing. Context window is basically, for example, as humans, we've been talking about so many things. So in the context of this, this podcast that we're doing, there are lots of things that we've talked about. Now, how much of that am I retain in my brain to answer the questions, right? Is the context that I have. Okay. So similarly, what each LLM is trying to do is give you a context. So for example, if you've sent LLM a text file which contains, let's say, 10,000 words, okay, and it has got a context of, let's say, 2,000 words. So it processes those 10,000 words and only remembers last 2,000.
Okay.
So if you'll ask it something that, what is my name? Let's say that text file had your name at the top, which was the first row, but it only remembers last 2,000 characters or words, then it will not be able to tell you name because it's out of their context window, right? So from that perspective, context window is very interesting, and generally it should be sufficient for us to have 100,000 or 50,000 kind of tokens context window, because generally we do, when we are interacting, let's say with chat GPT or any chat kind of application, we keep switching context very easily, right? We start a new thread, a new context has started, right? And within a context, I mean, even if we are talking, we will probably 100,000 tokens would be good enough for us to conclude a discussion, right? Because it will remember everything from that discussion. Now, where this million token comes into picture is basically if you're working on code and if you've got a huge code base, right, then it always helps LLM to look at the complete code base and then suggest improvements, right? So I think that's what you were talking about when you were talking about Google AI Studio, where you have, let's say, 100,000 tokens kind of context window, but still when you initially talk to it, it is able to understand things well. When you go to that 100,000 limit, it starts forgetting and things like that, or it becomes a lot slower. So the moment, I mean, when you're passing 100,000 tokens every time, LLM would take a lot more time to respond because it has to process all of those tokens. It has to understand all of those tokens, right? So that's where probably it becomes a little slower. And because if you're using the free tier, then obviously you're on the lower priority list. So that's where I think there will be some rationing or some slowdown and things like that, which is perceived. If you're on a paid tier or you're on a pro tier or a plus tier, then probably it still would be able to process all of those tokens. But context window is that way very important, that whatever lies within that context window, LLM would be able to use it and respond based on that very easily. Otherwise, it will start forgetting things which is beyond the context window.
Okay, so what you're saying is after I've used like 80,000 token context window tokens, even if I ask a simple question, it is still sending all that information.
So it has to go through the whole information and figure out where it was, and then it has to come back to you, right? Which is where it makes a lot of sense to keep switching. If you're talking about multiple different things, you talk about one thing in one context window, and then you start new chat, and then talk about that in the new chat and things like that. So that's where it will be a lot faster and a lot easier for them to respond.
Right. So another question I had built in this was, we've got all these new products nowadays, right? And all of them give us some limited tokens to test things out. But those limited tokens, they're not enough for a lot of us.
They don't want it to be enough. Yeah.
But ultimately, all of these services, they're paid, right? So how do we decide what service do we go for? Because all these are really expensive.
So how do you decide currently? Like, where do you spend money?
I just bounce back and forth between all the free products that I can find. So that's why I've got a list of like 50 free products.
So I agree with what you've said. So basically, one thing, I mean, so I have lots of money deposited in a lot of different services, right? Whenever I open, for example, I was using 11 Labs for my audio conversion and things like that. So they have some money there. Then there was, so every service that I end up trying, yeah, you rightly said, you do a little bit of, experimentation with the free tokens that they provide, and then you like it, and then you deposit some money, and then next is some new service comes in, and then you have to switch over. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a very well defined formula to tackle this kind of problem, but I have a lot of money in a lot of these accounts. So if you want to experiment, you can use that. But basically, yeah, that's what it is. I think. I mean, if you so one thing that I've kind of personally ensured is I have not given any money to any of the Chinese applications. Okay, I have been spending money on Indian and US based companies. That's what I've, at least up until now, I've ensured that. But who knows, tomorrow something else comes in from China. And so I mean, most of the Chinese models are open source, which is where they're hosted by Indian companies as well as US companies, so which is why I end up doing it. But yeah, so that's, I mean, that's been deliberate from my side up until now. I don't know if it changes tomorrow or not. But yeah, you've rightly pointed out that there are so many services, you experiment with everything, and then you don't know what to do.
So, one final question basically I had is, we've talked about LLMs, we've talked about AI agents, and finally we were talking about AI browsers. What do you think is the next step? The most logical thing I can think of is an AI based operating system to contain it all. That's the only thing I can think of.
See, the browser is a very interesting thing. What Perplexity has done is really interesting, because browser has all your login related information, right? For example, when we were trying to write so we've been writing QA agents that will do automated testing for your web applications, right? So the biggest problem was basically login in. So because it was our own applications, we were able to provide it login information, and it would log in into it, right? But for a user, for example, for me, if the browser is on the cloud, right, I give it a task, it has to execute on the cloud, then it'll have to log in there, which I'll never give it my credentials, right? So that way Perplexity has done the right thing, where they have all my login credentials in the browser, and they can do an access and everything. So I think browser was one of the most important things. Somebody has to figure out how to do it on mobile. Most likely Apple or somebody would come up with a service that will do something very similar on mobile as well, right? I don't know if we need a operating system, because Claude desktop already does it at the desktop level, right? You give it all the permissions, it will execute tasks on your desktop. People are still skeptical about it, because you don't want to give access to the desktop that you're using, because it has so much information, it can mess up anytime. And even we know that AI is probabilistic, we know that AI can mess up things, right, at times. So that's where browser is probably the best place. And I mean, you would probably not want to give access to your money accounts there if you don't want to. I mean, yeah, the privacy things would come in very quickly. So browser is, I think, the right place to be doing it, where you have all the access, because we end up spending almost 60, 70, 80% of our time in browser these days. We don't really do a whole lot of things on desktop, right? Even Google Sheets and Google Docs and everything is on pretty much on the browser. So I don't know if it's required to be done on the operating system level, but yeah, at least on the phone side, probably it'll have to be done with the operating system. Probably Apple or Android will have to do it on their own, because then running apps, they'll need permissions and stuff. So yeah, I don't know, but browser is the best. Like, it'll probably do the 80% of tasks that we do there, right? So yeah.
What an interesting time to be alive. We've got new services every single
Such an
day.
awesome time. I mean, so for our generation, we have seen so many transitions. We have seen from radio to TV to, basically, we have gone to black and white TV, then color TV, then computer, then internet, and now we're looking at AI. So we've seen so many transitions. I mean, you guys are still like, this is pretty much the biggest transition happening for you guys, right?
Right.
For us, we've already seen so much, and it seems people are saying that next 15 years we will see as many changes as have happened in last 100 years. So I don't know what's going to come. So just wait and watch, probably. Or probably, so this is the best time to be alive, and probably do something very interesting right now, so that, yeah, so that because when it was .com kind of thing, 1999 and stuff, I was still a kid. We didn't have a lot of internet access. We couldn't do a lot of things in India. We were not able to capitalize. So that's where I think this is pretty much the right time for people from our generation, because we have all the knowledge from what has happened and what we've done. And now this is a new area which is being opened, right? So with all the knowledge and quickly picking up this knowledge from AI, we can probably do a lot of big things, and which is where our country is kind of lagging behind as well. I mean, as a country, we are basically, we've got huge population, right? And which is why, so there were some headlines in the news that why couldn't Indian services companies, Infosys or TCS or these companies could not come up with something like LLM. They were reaping profits and they were taking it home and they were distributing, right? So that's where, I mean, the first thought that came to my mind was how dumb of these journalists. Why would, so India has population, India has got people here, we can do manual work. Why would I think about a solution that would eliminate, I mean, this workforce? Nobody, I mean, ultimately it's all about आवश्यकता ही आविष्कार की जर्नी है. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? If that necessity is not there in my country, I have got so many people to do so much stuff. Why would I even think about those kind of solutions, right? So that's where, I mean, you can say so many things just being a journalist, but then think about it. If you don't need that thing, you'll not invent it. Now that it has been invented, now you have to figure out quickly how to, evolve so that we still are competing in this marketplace. But then that's, I mean, I was kind of digressing, but basically, yeah, we've seen huge transitions, and this is going to be another very interesting phase, at least next 5-6 years. Let's see how we cope up, where we go from there.
This is probably the first transition that I'm witnessing, because I was born in 2006 and the first iPhone came in 2007.
Yep.
So I haven't seen any technological revolution as such. But nowadays, every single day, something new is coming up.
Yep. So so you were talking about, what as an engineering graduate or somebody at your level should be doing. The most important thing, even if, I mean, let's keep coding and everything aside, the most important skill that has to be developed is learn how to learn stuff. Okay. The moment you have that skill, and basically don't be scared of learning new things. I mean, you'll have to, so at least for us, we got sufficient time to learn C++, and then we got sufficient time to transition to Java, and then we got sufficient time to transition to something else. Now that transition time is getting squeezed so much that, within a month, probably you have to learn something else, and then something else, and then something else. So that's where learning how to learn is the most important skill, and then unlearning and relearning something completely new. You cannot get tired of, so that is going to be a very big distinguishing factor, at least for your generation. If you can focus on something, quickly learn it, and then use it, and then learn something else, and build on top of that. That is one skill which will be very important. And people get tired very easily. At least for my generation, people are like, we've learned so many things, we've done so many things, how many times you have to learn? But for your generation, that is going to be the most important skill of everything else.
So we've come full circle, and ultimately it's intelligence. Learning something and solving that problem is what matters.
I don't know. I mean, so for our generation, information itself was a problem, right? We didn't have information. We had to go to library physically, and then you read the books there and things like that. Now, internet has democratized information. Everybody has information available. Now it's totally up to me whether I read it or not. I've got MIT lectures, I've got Stanford lectures, I've got IIT lectures. Everything else is available on the YouTube and stuff. Whether I spend time or not, that was the problem, right? Now the next wave has come in where intelligence is available for everybody. If I'm IQ 10 or I'm not 10, if I'm IQ 80 or 70 or 100, whatever, right? I've got an AI agent that can do 150, right? So intelligence is pretty much democratized now. Everybody has intelligence. Now what is going to be the distinguishing factor, right? Earlier information was, now it's information is everybody is having it. So this generation is, as much as I see it, it's very distracted. So they're not focused, they were not focusing on information. So whoever was kind of winning. But now intelligence is also available to everybody. So what is going to distinguish you as a human? I don't know. I mean, my thought is probably human connection. How many interesting friends you've got, how many people you know, how you leverage human connection. That's going to be very important. And probably the agency, basically how much you want to, how much hunger you've got to accomplish something, that is going to be very important. Because you might have all the information, you might have all the intelligence, but if you don't have that hunger to achieve anything, you'll probably not go anywhere, right? So those human qualities are going to be really important as far as I can see. I don't know, I'm still figuring things out.
So on the internet now, we've got this term for people who are using ChatGPT all the time, third-party thinkers. People who don't have their own
Yeah.
intelligence and cannot do anything without the help of ChatGPT or anything.
Oh, absolutely. So once you have AGI, once you have, autonomous agents doing stuff, it'll be so difficult to, I mean, so even today on social media, it's so difficult to figure out who has written his post on his own or who's gotten it written by ChatGPT. And like you said, you posted something from Perplexity, right? So you
Right.
don't even go to LinkedIn or you don't even go to Twitter. You just tell it to, compose something and put that. So that's becoming more like a garbage place that, whatever AI thinks, it can post it. So that's where, yeah, it's going to, the human thing. For example, a day before yesterday, I was talking to my wife, your mom, right? She was talking about a sari that has been made like without machines, like with humans, right? It took 30 days to make it, right?
Wow.
And it was very expensive, right? So I think the code would also be similar 4 or 5 years down the line. This code has been written by a human. It is going to cost 10 times more than what you are getting from AI. Maybe we'll come to that point. Let's see where we go. Anything else you want to talk about?
I'm out of questions for now, but this is such an interesting time because the future it's a mystery. We're looking into a cloud basically.
So basically, as a CEO of the company, I have one of the responsibility I've got is to look in future and figure out what's going to happen and then adjust my today accordingly so that we are prepared for the future, right? And last 4 or 5 years have been very turbulent for us. I mean, there was COVID, and then there was such fluctuation in the job market. There were so many people getting hired and fired. So what we've witnessed is basically these big companies, they also don't have very clear vision, right? Every one company started hiring just after COVID, everybody else started hiring as well. They didn't even think about whether they need that workforce or not, and which increased like salaries like anything, and which is where resources were scarce, and which is why lots of people end up joining engineering as well because they thought there is going to be so much demand, right? And now there is this firing wave going on. Bigger companies are firing people and everybody's following same pattern. We don't know whether that's the right thing or not, at least right now. But yeah, so as a CEO, I have to see what's going to happen in the future, and then I have to prepare myself to this. So at least right now, I don't see very clearly beyond 2 or 3 years. This is the first time where I mean, with Trump there, obviously it's a little more uncertain. But even if we eliminate that factor, just focus on AI, that itself is changing almost 10x every 6 months. So you don't know what will happen in a couple of years, right? But then you have to still kind of navigate this, and you have to keep thinking as to what would happen and things like that. So yeah, so a lot of very interesting things. You need to keep track of what's going on, what's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with the part that even larger companies are not able to figure out and see into the future because Apple announced Apple Intelligence like 1.5 years ago, and in 2025 August we've still got nothing related to that. So
Right. Yeah, some days back I was talking to some of my friends. Basically, so like I was talking about Indian journalists saying that Indian companies did not think about LLM stuff. So one of the examples that I gave was basically Google had this technology. They had Ilya Sutskever and everybody else. They talked about transformer. They knew about this. They couldn't release it because this would disrupt their search business, right? So basically, yeah, I mean, even if you've got the solution, you would not put it out because you don't want to disrupt your own self, right? So yeah, basically we can talk about anything, but then you have to think about the business, and then you have to think about what's going to help you, what's not going to help you, and based on that you take a call. So that's what it is. Let's see. But very exciting times. We are going to have a lot of fun in next couple of years probably. I mean, every day we are having lots of fun, but then it's going to probably the pace is going to increase a lot more. So we'll have interesting things. So if you don't have anything else, let's close it down. It's almost 16th August now. So we've done the first podcast basically for a day already. So let's close it. You want to say something as the closing comments, or you're done?
No, I'm done actually. Yeah.
Good. So it was very interesting. If it we'll review the clip. If it comes out good, we'll probably publish it as well. And hopefully, yeah, the other mic did not work today for us. So we had to just do it with first mic, and we'll have to probably figure out if we make it a regular thing, because you do a lot of experiments with AI. I'm also doing a lot of experiments with AI, and we talk to a lot of people as well. So if we find out some more questions, some interesting things that we need to discuss, then we'll probably do it. I mean, now you're going to go back to college, so we'll hopefully do it online as well. But let's see. If this turns out well, we'll probably do it more often. If not, we'll just close it here.
This podcast, even if we don't post it, it's going to be like a time capsule for us. Right? We'll look back after 10 years, see what we got right.
Absolutely.
What was happening back then in 2025.
So we haven't done lots of predictions here. I mean, I've got a whole, I can talk for a couple of hours about what all predictions I have for the future. Maybe we'll keep it for the next podcast, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about what we're doing today. Like you rightly said, it will be a thing that we can refer back in future, let's say a month or 2 months later on, to think about what we were talking about a couple of months back. And then that will be a very interesting thing. And then we can talk about the predictions in the next podcast. Maybe that could be a very interesting topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you, guys. If somebody's watched it, thanks so much for watching. Bye.